Active land management is required to maintain High Weald landscape features and their associated wildlife.
If we imagine ourselves standing in this field maybe 10 years ago when we first moved to the property, I think we'd be up to our chest in rank grass and really a fairly low diversity. I'd like to feel that in the last 7 years to 10 years that the diversity has greatly improved. We see that now through a larger number of butterflies and other insects. You can maybe hear the grasshoppers singing in the background, and there's just a greater sense of life and noise in the fields now than there was before. So from that extent, I think that there's definitely been an improvement. We have an old orchard here which is nice, and there's a lot of scrubland around that, which is great because we have nightingale breeding here, which is lovely in itself. And in many ways I've actually tried to create a sort of scruffier appearance to our land rather than a more managed, tidier appearance. So in addition to some of the wildflower meadows, we deliberately keep scrub and rank grassland, because we're very fortunate also to have barn owl breeding here, and of course for the owls they need the rank grassland to hunt, and there's a very deliberate attempt on our part to ensure that there is a slightly more scruffier, unmanaged appearance to some of the land, to ensure that the voles have habitat and that there are sufficient mice and other animals there for the owls to eat.
This practice can apply to small back gardens as well as large fields and woodlands.
You don't have to spend enormous amounts of money to do a lot of these things. I'm lucky in this garden because a lot of the shrubs and trees that I've got, things like the hazels and the hollies, are courtesy of the wildlife anyway. They planted them, I didn't. And I decided to leave them where they were or just transplant them to where I did want them. Well, because we are so rich in wildlife around here, and they also provide an enormous amount of pleasure to the people who look after them. They are good company in the garden to have, and also they help the garden as well, some of them. So I'm always very glad to have them here. A pond is absolutely wonderful to have in the garden. Brings frogs into the garden. They've got to have somewhere to go now. And they are of so much use in the garden because they take all the slugs. So that, for example, I can grow hostas around the pond where I can't grow them anywhere else because the frogs keep them away. I've also got newts. It's also attractive to look at because I've got water mint growing here. I've got Veronica Beccabunga growing, the brook lime as well. And the irises are here as well. And the kingcups, so that it's a very, very attractive focal point. If you're looking, you can see all kinds of things in the pond. I wouldn't be without one.
All landowners have a part to play in preserving wildlife in the High Weald.
When we first moved here, we obviously didn't have time to set up any grazing, and we inherited this field along with the rest of the property, and we were shocked at how much and how high the vegetation grew. But it was really quite difficult to sort of keep on top of the grass. And then the following year, I think we got a dozen or 15 ewes that were pregnant, and they lambed here, which was just fantastic. People just love looking at lambs, and really the sheep have just brought life to the place. And we get up in the morning and we look out and count them, and check out whether they're okay, and more or less say hello to them, you know, from the house, really.
Trying to restore your own land is just something that is entirely pleasurable, and I'm sure, like everyone else, I'll make a fair few mistakes, but you also succeed in ways that surpass your expectations, and clearly I've been fortunate to benefit from a lot of excellent advice from others in that process. I think where I'm seeing it now is that interest that's always been with me since a very young child is now seeping into my own children. So my eldest child, Ben, is extremely interested in animals and plants, and goes running around with his butterfly net, and I think to his credit can identify a large number of butterflies and other insects, and that's all a factor of simply growing up somewhere where there is so much to look at and observe that feeds that enthusiasm in wildlife that I think is really at the core of why all of us try and make these efforts, that it's not just for yourself, but it's for your children and hopefully other generations, and that the more that you can instill in others that love of wildlife and nature, then the more people will carry on in their own ways and try and make their own best efforts elsewhere.